5 years, we've seen some great successes in disaster risk reduction. One is, in a way, at a very high level, but very concrete outcome is that an increasing number of people, organizations and governments have moved away from seeing the disaster as an event and understanding the risk of disasters and how you manage those risks to minimize the impact, to reduce the impact, and sometimes even to prevent a disaster from happening. This is what many people like to call a transformational change. Concretely, maybe one very positive thing in the middle of a big tragedy is what happened in Philippines, the Typhoon Haiyan, the last November, where the image that the world has is of Tacloban, the immense destruction. Unfortunately, they haven't seen how many communities in Philippines actually had prepared themselves for 10 years in practicing how to interpret early warning systems, how to evacuate in an orderly fashion, how to make sure they take their personal belongings with them or everything that's important, including food, so that no lives were lost and people could return to important physical destruction, but they could return to their area and start rebuilding their lives pretty quickly. And that's a very important progress because it demonstrates that taking action on early warning and preparedness pays off. And when we move even more, the understanding of how to protect economic assets is critically important. So that's, I think, a big achievement. Other achievements also, in fact, from Philippines is the recognition of the economic and protective values of mangrove forest at coastline. I think experts have known this now for a very long time, but only now with the recognition of very big population concentration on extremely exposed coastal areas, regular superstorms, storms, typhoons, cyclones, is undermining people's ability to protect themselves at coastline. And the mangrove, therefore, investing in rebuilding mangrove forest and protecting them against destruction and over-harvesting is both a human and an economic added value. And maybe the final example, I think, is the understanding of cities. There's a lot of focus on cities today, very good. And for most of us, cities are very positive, but there is also a tendency to see them as a concentration of risk, which is true. The more people and the more economic asset you concentrate, the bigger the risk. Now, what many cities around the world, they begin to understand also how that is an efficiency for applying climate adaptation, ecosystems, and natural instruments to improve the urban environment through roof forests, through increasing the drainage capacity of city, through green areas and grass. Many cities have huge problem with drainage. It's old, poorly maintained, and too many people using it. So combining natural instruments and technology and engineering, I think, is a critical opportunity for cities to become more safer, but also more habitable and more livable for all of us. Disaster risk reduction is actually a policy concept, an overriding policy, and I think this is one of the reasons why it seems more intuitive than practical. So obviously a lot of the work that we are doing through the Yoga Framework for Action and working with many expert organizations is try to show in practice what type of action contribute to reduce disaster risk. So at the highest level, reducing disaster risk really requires a broad range of instruments. And what is the specific combination of action depends on the risk profile of the area. If it's a rural area, if it's an urban area, if it's a very rich country with a lot of expensive infrastructure that needs to be made more resilient and safer. So I think we are now in a period where this understanding of the concrete actions that lead to reducing the impact of disasters and Also, and very importantly, reducing the impact of risk for disasters, because that's really the key area. I would say the private sector is a big role of this, but countries need to have a strategic view. The types of investments we make today and in the next 20 years will determine how risk will grow in the future. And that's why we try to always concretize the issue of risk, the issue of how you reduce risk, the issue of how you prevent the accumulation of future risk. I can see that it's making its way into national agendas, policy planning. Why? Everyone understands the loss of life. What has rapidly evolved now, I would say, the understanding of the economic impact of disasters, and that puts another policy trigger on the need for action and integrated planning nationally.